today I'm going to show you how to use the details icon to guide a ponder activity for this first, second, or third grade project on animal habitats. This activity will help the students to organize their thoughts, connect their prior knowledge, and ask meaningful questions about the topic. So when I give the students this page in the workbook, I want to ask them 3 questions. First, what do you already know? So what are some things that you know about animals and animal habitats? Once they jot down some ideas, some details that they know, facts, features, and parts about animal habitats, I might ask them to focus in on one specific type of animal and habitat. So in this case, my student decided to focus in on birds, and I said, that's great. Tell me some facts that you know about that animal. Where does it live, and what does it need to survive? And so my student might say that it definitely needs a tree to build that nest to survive. It eats worms, and it eats bugs. And they need to have an environment that is, not too cold. So we'll say moderate climate for the specific bird that they're thinking about. Then I would ask my students, what do you wonder about birds and the birds' habitats? What would happen if the bird can't find their worms, or they can't find their bugs, or maybe they can't find items to build their nest? What might happen to their habitat if those things weren't available? And then thinking about our kids that we need to differentiate, maybe they need a little bit of scaffolding, like sentence starters. So I would have them write, or I would write on their page, I know that, and then they fill in the blank. What do they know about their animal and the animal habitat? Or this reminds me of, and then what connections can they make to their animal and their habitat? And then again, I wonder if. What are some things that they want to know about animals and animal habitats to help them with this project? And then finally, for your student who maybe they came in and they already knew everything that there was to know about animal habitats, they're coming in way above grade level with the science standards. So you might ask them to compare 2 animal habitats, giving them 2 specific animals and habitats and compare and contrast those. You might ask them to predict, what would happen if the polar bear's Arctic ice melts? Or how could a camel's desert habitat change if there was suddenly more rain? And you could ask students to write or draw those side-by-side comparisons and really highlight the unique details and survival needs of each animal. They could then predict the consequences of the environmental changes and use those details as evidence to support their ideas. That way, everyone is doing the same activity. They all have the same ponder sheet. They all have the same topic, but what they fill in and draw and label and write looks different based on their needs. Okay, we've fully fleshed out all of the details, all of our ideas, all of our schema about animal habitats, and really focused in on one type of animal to get our project started. Next, it is time to delve into the inquiry portion of our project. We want to start with this workbook page and the essential question of many animals are losing their homes because of changes in the environment. So how can we help animals find safe habitats to survive? For the first portion of the research inquiry, I still want the students to focus in on details because they don't know everything there is to know about their animal. So we're going to still stick with birds for this example. So I might ask the students to think of or to find research specific details about what exactly do birds eat, where do they sleep, how do they stay safe. And so they're looking through resources, maybe like Pebble Go or Britannica Online or some library books to find answers to these details to help them further develop their understanding and their knowledge about birds. From there, I'd ask them to stop, and I want them to find a partner, and I want them to share all of the details that they have found out about their animal. The whole point is that every student is focusing on a different animal, or different groups of students are focusing on different animals. So I want them to share everything they know or they've researched about their animal and where they sleep, eat, and how they stay safe, where they live, and how they survive. And that will lead us to our next part of research, which is patterns. And really this research comes from the details that they learned, but also the conversations that they had with their partner, thinking about what patterns can we find in habitats, in different animal habitats from those conversations with your peers. What are some similarities? And, what are some things that repeat? Some things that maybe all desert animals have in common, or some adaptations that are similar, like being nocturnal or needing less water. And this final bit of research focuses in on big idea. I want students to understand why are habitats important for survival. So this might take a little bit more research into different resources, books, read-alouds, videos, things like that. They might be able to pull this from their conversations and the research that they did before. But really, why is having the right habitat so important for the animal? And then what happens if it changes? And what happens if it disappears? So getting the students to think about the larger implications of the research that they already have, not just citing facts and pieces and parts of their research. And then finally, this might be a conversation between the student and the teacher. This might be just some preliminary ideas about how to solve the problem, but how can we take all of this information from our ponder, the details, the patterns from our conversation, the big idea of animal habitats in our animal, and how can we converge those ideas? How can they come together to start to help us to understand how to solve that problem? Not necessarily a fully flushed out solution, but really digging into some preliminary ideas. And so I would actually ask them to cite at least 3 ideas on how they might solve the problem, because we know that students are going to start to come up with some ideas that may or may not work, and we can further flesh that out in that critique process. So for students who need a little bit more of a challenge, maybe they already know a ton of details about animals and animal habitats, and so details is not the right place for them to live. You could instead have them focus on maybe some trends in their research and what changes are happening to habitats worldwide. What are some patterns of habitat loss? Bringing in something that's a much more challenging, big, real-world concept. You could also have them think about ethics and research, and then come up with ideas of what is our responsibility, or how are people impacting animal habitats right now. And then, as always, those interdisciplinary connections, so bringing in some math, some art, some literature, and that's where their research lays up here in order for them to be adequately challenged. So now that our students have researched the animals and the habitats, it's time for the authenticity portion of the project. So we want to bring in this workbook page that asks students to really focus in on the essential question, materials, plan, and a diagram. And for these kiddos, they are thinking about how can they help their animal find or create a safe habitat where they can not just survive, but also thrive. And so I would ask my students first, can we talk about what birds need to survive? So they might tell me that they need trees for shelter, or twigs or leaves or grass to build nests, and access to food and water. And so we would need to make sure that in their plan they have each of those pieces. When students plan, we want them to have each piece here on the left, and then they can diagram their solution on the right, and then jot down the list of materials and resources that they need up here. And so my student decided that they need to have a birdhouse for that shelter piece. My student also decided that they need to have access to bird seed so that they have adequate food, and they also need to have some materials to build the nest within all of this. So when I ask my student to dig deeper, they might say some details of the birdhouse. That they need are some wood for the kit, and also a tree to put the birdhouse so it's in its natural habitat. They noticed in their research that they should probably have some sort of holder for the birds to get the bird seed, and they want to attach that near the birdhouse. And they also noticed a pattern that the birds in their area like a variety of seeds, not just one type. And then they decided that they want materials for the nest, a variety of twigs, fabric, and cotton. And then over here on the right, we've got the diagram of their solution. So they have their shelter drawn here. They want to place it inside the tree. They want a little food container or holder attached to that shelter, as well as a basket at the base of the tree with nest materials. So then they would take all of those ideas and jot down their needs, their materials, and their resources. So the next workbook page that we want to bring out for students when they have fully fleshed out their idea is to have them have a conversational roundtable, but not in the normal way that we think about conversational roundtable. In this case, students are having a conversation from different perspectives. So environmental scientists, how do the changes in climate affect the availability of food or shelter for the birds? Community member, what can we do to make our neighborhoods more bird friendly, or how can we educate others in our community? Gardener, what kind of plants could I grow in my garden to provide more of a natural habitat, maybe not using harmful pesticides? And then kind of a fun twist from the bird's perspective. What do we think that the bird needs to feel comfortable while nesting, and how do birds adapt to changes in the environment? How do they feel? What do they do when there's loss of trees or food sources? Then the next piece is bringing in that partner perspective and critique, really weighing in on each other's projects. And so students, everyone's focusing on the same essential question, but they have different animals. So I would jot down some talking points as far as my perspective on my project, some important details about my project, and really the big idea, the main problem that my project is solving. And then my partner would listen, and they would then also share their perspectives, details, and big idea. And then we would give each other some ideas, some critiques, some questions, some next steps. And that's where I would jot down as a student, here are some things that my partner suggested that I might want to add or to consider to make my project even better. Next, our students want to fill out a big idea product page in the workbook so that they have a chance to describe their product and then really analyze that big idea. So my student who was studying researching birds decided that the big idea here is birds need a safe habitat to survive, and I can help them make spaces to protect them and provide things that they need. So then I would say, great, let's analyze that just a little bit further with some details. These details columns really hold up or support your big idea statement. And so a student might say, well, birds need shelter and nesting materials like trees and shrubs and other natural features. If I plant trees or I build them a nest, then that gives them that shelter. If I give them the materials, then they have items so they can build their nest. They might over here talk about the detail of food and water and how that's essential. And so their plan includes a little area for birdseed and maybe a bird bath. And then the last detail might be that birds need to be protected from predators and pollution. And their details they might use are the elevated birdhouse structure and maintaining green spaces and keeping the community involved and informed in ways that they can protect the birds. And then, as always, for my student who maybe just analyzing 3 details is not going to work for them, you can bring in patterns and have them talk about the patterns and not just the birds' habitats, but also how that relates to other habitats, other animals. You could have them think about the ethical implications of both sides, really thinking about from the bird's perspective, from the environmentalist perspective, how can we make sure that we are protecting these birds, but doing so in a way that keeps them safe. Really bringing in any icon to help them to focus, but also support. A great idea down here is to bring in those unanswered questions and have students think about what learning still needs to be done to further protect the birds or to further this project, showing them that learning's never done. Did you like this idea as well as the workbook pages? Then check out our thinking guides, our student-friendly workbooks and consumables on our website.